Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are reviewing Scream, the fifth installment in the franchise, and... Sorry, one second. Hello?
Hello, Sam. What's your favorite scary movie?
Who is this?
It's always someone you know, Sam. That's the first rule.
So I've got to admit that the horror genre has never really been my favourite genre of films, mainly because I think there's very few nowadays that get done to a high standard that are very effective or well made and powerful. That being said, I kind of went in blind to watch Ready or Not last year, just one night at university, and I couldn't take my eyes off of it. It's probably my favourite film in the kind of horror comedy genre. And that's what ultimately got me really excited for Scream, was the fact that it's the same directors returning. And then after that, I'd only seen clips from the first Scream film, so I went back and watched the first four. And I've got to say, I think it's probably the only horror franchise that hasn't completely derailed itself and lost the plot. It's that meta and self-referential approach that I think gives Scream its unique selling point. And I think it made the right choices in terms of its meta approach with this one. The idea of legacy characters and toxic fandoms really gave it a modern edge and made it fit in with the kind of modern context that we are now in. I mean, the last few months alone, we've had Ghostbusters, Spider-Man No Way Home, both of which were heavily reliant on legacy characters for their big fan service moments. And Scream is no different. And it's both amusing and frustrating that kind of self-referential approach in the Scream films puts them above criticism, I suppose, because they're so knowingly taking jabs at the genre while committing a lot of the same errors in jest. I personally love the toxic fandom motive and the kind of self-awareness of it, because we do live in an age of toxic fandoms. You know, the massive Marvel collective that I am a part of, but the collective who can't see Marvel doing anything wrong, they really annoy me. And it is just a very hate-fueled minefield out there, kind of on the web. And I definitely think it was addressed in a way that was really like, okay, sometimes you take it too far. And I personally really dug it. Now, I know a lot of people who say that a Scream film is only ever as good as the killer reveal at the end, but I personally disagree with that. I don't think I've ever watched a whodunit film, whether that's a kind of detective mystery or a horror like the Scream films, where I've found a reveal at the end so satisfying or so kind of rewarding and refreshing. Particularly in the Scream films, obviously, like, we're supposed to believe that every 2 years two kind of teenagers get radicalized into terrorizing the town and shanking a load of people in the Woodsboro community alone. So for me, it's never been about the whodunits. They're always kind of melodramatic and over the top, so it's impossible to be let down by a Scream reveal, I think. Obviously, Stu and Billy are kind of heralded as the kind of great or OG Scream villains. I personally loved Timothy Olyphant's kind of over-the-top performance at the end of Scream 2. I personally really loved Emma Roberts as the villain in Scream 4, and I think Jack Quaid really sold it to me in this one. I thought the other killer was quite predictable in this film, mainly because I didn't think the narrative gave her enough focus as just an ordinary person. She was always kind of presented as a bit of a shady outcast. That, and she played a kind of sadistic killer in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and met the legitimate same fate in this as well, which I assume was a kind of nod at that film. And my only main criticism with the film is kind of believing that she was capable of killing Dewey, particularly in the very kind of visceral way that she did. I thought Dewey's death was really powerful, really evocative, frustrating as well in a way for such an OG veteran to kind of go out with that simple distraction, but hey ho. I really liked how Ghostface kind of paid homage to him with that murder scene, and I also really loved how, as a slasher film, Scream felt very brutal in this one. I've always found the kind of blood and guts in the previous films quite campy and deliberately satirical, whereas with this one, all the injuries really kind of landed. The opening scene alone, where the girl has her ankle stepped on and it snaps, was just a real kind of wincing moment. We've got that scene where Ghostface slowly pushes the knife through the boy's neck, or the scene where he kind of very quickly stabs the guy outside the car, and then contrasting that with the scene where Dewey gets slowly kind of gutted in his back. There was just a real assortment and creative use of the knife as a kind of murder weapon in this film, which was really refreshing because I don't think we've seen too much variety with that in previous films. I really loved all the new characters as well. I think they kind of effortlessly took on these kind of leading roles and supporting roles. And they were all very charismatic in their own way. And the sparing use of the legacy characters in the film was definitely done right, I think. Dewey was obviously the main character probably of the OG3, and he got a real sense of closure, I think, with his arc in this film. And the way that was then used as Sidney Prescott's motive to return, I think that all worked. In fact, I think all the scenes with the legacy cast were fantastic. I think Sidney Prescott is probably my favourite horror heroine. She really has some badass one-liners in this film. And I also love the kind of scene between Gale and Dewey early on, which is really their only interaction in the film. And it kind of looking back, that should have probably been a red flag that Dewey was going to die, because it was a very much get things out in the open, and kind of confess feelings and whatever, and it kind of packed a lot more of an emotional punch than I expected it to. But it was just overall a really well made film, really well paced. I loved the use of settings like the hospital, the original house, the reveal of Billy as our lead character's father, and then his cameo appearances as a kind of psychotic angel on your shoulder guide throughout the film was really well utilised. And I think that Scream as a franchise really needs to play it smart now regarding its future, because I think they've probably got one or two really good plots that they could utilise for a final instalment. But after that, I think it's going to verge on being a parody that's also an unintentional parody, because they just don't know when to stop. I think they've got to bring Stu back for another film, and I think that would be a really good meta approach, the idea of an original villain returning for a kind of final installment. That would give them a lot of kind of creative license to play with, I think, in terms of the meta universe of these films. The idea of a franchise only really having one iconic villain, that sort of thing. Or even the idea of Stu being brought back as a reluctant anti-hero and then playing on those tropes of the kind of villain turned hero. Especially if there were other Ghostface killers out there who he was kind of insulted by their performance and their approach. Or the idea of Stu coming back as a killer and having two Ghostface killers who kind of clash with each other as well, and who we don't kind of find out about until the end. I think that would be another fantastic approach. So I think there is room there for the franchise to evolve. I just think there's not too much left in the tank for them to cover now before they need to check out and end it on a high. I was so relieved when I watched it. It was just kind of hitting all the right notes. I was really immersed throughout. There were some very kind of uncomfortable, uneasy moments, and then the filmmakers kind of knowingly keep delaying the big jump scare moment. But I thought it was really well done just all round. And it really does honour Wes Craven's legacy, I think, which is the biggest thing and was probably the biggest fear for original fans going into this one. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments below. Liking and subscribing to my channel would be a huge help so that I can keep making content. But in the meantime, I will have more videos up for you soon, but thank you for watching.